The first night I slept in my car, it was January in Chicago. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through the cracked windows like a blade. I had parked behind a strip mall on the south side, under a flickering light that buzzed like it was laughing at me. My back seat was folded down. My coat was my blanket. My gym bag was my pillow. Across the street stood the building I used to work in, a 3-story brick office with tall windows and a glowing sign that carried the company name I helped build from nothing. I used to have a desk on the second floor. A coffee mug with my name on it. A future. Then one afternoon, in a glass conference room that smelled like cologne and power, they decided I was no longer aligned with the company's direction. What that really meant was this: I had built the marketing strategy that saved them from bankruptcy. I had worked 80-hour weeks. I had slept under my desk twice during product launches. And when investors finally showed up, when the money finally started flowing, they pushed me out. "You're replaceable," Daniel, my former partner, Eric Whitman, had said with a smirk that still visits me in my dreams. Don't confuse hard work with ownership. Ownership. The word tasted bitter. I had signed papers I barely understood when we were desperate. I trusted him. He trusted lawyers. By the time I realized what I'd given away, my shares were diluted to dust. The worst part wasn't losing the job. It wasn't even losing the money. It was the laughter. 2 weeks after they fired me, I went back to collect the last of my belongings. My keycard no longer worked. I stood outside the locked glass door like a stranger. Through the window, I saw them, Eric and the new investors, raising champagne. Eric saw me. He walked over slowly, opened the door just enough to speak. "You should have played the long game," he said quietly. Then he looked at my old hoodie, the one with the company logo, and smiled. "Take care of yourself." Behind him, someone laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just amused. That was the day I moved into my car. I didn't tell my parents. I told my friends I was working on something new. I showered at a cheap gym downtown. I parked in different neighborhoods so no one would notice. At night, I stared at the ceiling of my Honda Civic and replayed every conversation, every signature, every warning sign I ignored. I wasn't angry at first. I was ashamed. I had believed loyalty mattered. I believed friendship meant something. I believed that building something together meant sharing it. The shame slowly turned into something else. Clarity. I started reading again: business law, corporate structures, investment strategies. I spent entire days in the public library, taking notes like my life depended on it. Because it did. I found out the building across the street wasn't owned by the company. It was leased from a holding firm, Midwest Commercial Properties. The lease was aggressive, expensive, long-term. I dug deeper. The holding firm had debt. A lot of it. And their largest asset was that exact block, 4 buildings, including the one where my old office stood. The world began to shift in my mind. Revenge doesn't have to scream. It can whisper. For the next 5 years, I lived small and worked quietly. I took freelance contracts no one else wanted. I learned how to flip failing ad campaigns. I saved every dollar. I invested carefully, slowly, no flashy risks. I stopped thinking about Eric as a person. I started thinking of him as a variable. When my savings grew, I partnered, this time carefully, with a retired real estate broker who liked my discipline. We started acquiring distressed commercial properties on the edges of Chicago. Every deal taught me something. Every closing made me calmer. The anger cooled into patience. I drove past that brick office sometimes. Their sign grew bigger. Their cars grew nicer. Eric's face showed up in local business magazines. Young visionary, self-made success. I would sit at a red light and watch employees stream in, laughing, holding lattes. They didn't know I once slept in the back seat of a car across the street. They didn't know I was still watching. 5 years later, Midwest Commercial Properties defaulted on a massive loan. It barely made the news. Just a short article about restructuring and potential asset liquidation. I read it 3 times. The block was going up for auction. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I made calls. I met privately with my broker and secured financing before the auction was publicly announced, using the equity from the properties we had built over 5 disciplined years. I formed a new LLC under a neutral name, ensuring no connection to my past company could be traced back to me. At the auction downtown, I kept my head down, let bigger investors fight over flashier properties, and waited until the final minutes to make my move on the entire block. When the hammer came down, I owned the land beneath the building where they once reviewed their lease in detail and found multiple performance clauses they had ignored during their rapid expansion. Through my attorney, I formally notified the company of necessary structural upgrades and backdated compliance issues, legal, precise, unavoidable. Their operating costs doubled overnight, and investors began asking hard questions Eric couldn't charm his way out of. When they requested a lease renegotiation, I agreed to meet, sitting at the head of the table this time, watching recognition slowly drain the color from Eric's face. I offered them two options: pay the revised lease at market correction rates or vacate within 90 days. No insults, no raised voice, just terms. 90 days later, I stood alone inside the empty brick building as their sign was removed. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply replaced it with the name of my new company, built from patience instead of betrayal, and finally understood that ownership isn't given, it's earned, quietly, when no one is watching.